Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to have a little chat about the Warhammer Live previews, or the Warhammer Preview Lives. That doesn't really sound as good, does it? I'll be honest, the order of the Preview Live and Live Preview always trips me up, even though it's been the same since day one. But you know what hasn't been the same since day one? The style in which they have chosen to do these previews. It's changed. It's changed over time, and the last few that we've had have been really quite polished, very different from what we've been used to. In days of old, the previews were two blokes having a chat, and then they would tell you about the new thing that was coming up, and they would show you some models. There would be a trailer before that, of course, but there would also be quite a bit of vamping, quite a bit of just chat back and forth. You know, the traditional, what's your favourite out of this lot? What's your favourite out of this lot? What do you like most about this? What do you like most about that? That sort of thing. And it had quite an informal, relaxed, casual feel, even though it was going live to thousands upon thousands of people pretty much every single time. Now, however, things are different. Instead of getting that sort of live, in-action commentator thing going on, instead we have a polished presentation where you've got a presenter who is doing interviews with the people who are making the models, who are making the games, and we have the trailers as we had before, but instead we've got this sleek, slick kind of, extremely well put together video package that, whilst is, I think, more informative, I think it's still not quite there. It's not quite there. I think, before we fully get into this, it's worth stating something. I can't do what the Warhammer studio does. They have clearly got it, properly nailed down. The set which they are using for the previews is really, really nicely done. I think it shows that it's something a little bit above what you might expect from your standard rando sat at home, for instance, but it's also fairly informal. It's nothing too overbearing. And the most important thing is that the actual, setting they're in doesn't feel necessarily corporate. Before, it had very much the feeling of, we've seen other people do this, and so we are going to do it too, because that's what the people want. The newer previews feel more like we are trying to tell you about this product, but also show you the people who are making it, which I think on balance is probably a little bit better. See, without wishing to sound like I'm really going after the hosts of these things, Games Workshop and the people who work for Games Workshop, they are not the same people who do this as what I do, or as what Mikey from Hellstorm does, or Valrak does, or, any number of other people just sat in their own space making this type of video, right? Games Workshop and the employees of Games Workshop have got a slightly different position than we do. So when it comes to, for instance, two people talking live, commentating, talking about the pictures of the models they're seeing, there is an element there that is missing from when I do it, and that element is the ability to be able to just say what you want to say. When it comes to outright criticism of some sort of new model or some sort of new system, they can't do that. They're not allowed to. They are working for the company who are putting on the broadcast that we are watching, and as such, it definitely has felt in the past like some of the vamping has kind of lacked, well, I say lacked honesty. I don't think it's that the people doing the commentating or the presenting on previous previews are being dishonest about how much they like the stuff they are talking about. Because one of the big things, especially with I think on-screen talent, that sort of thing, one of the big things with Games Workshop is they hire people who love Games Workshop. And so a lot of that enthusiasm, I think it's unfair to say, is false. But at the same time, you can be extremely enthusiastic for something and yet still be willing to criticise it if there's something that you don't feel appeals to you or doesn't address, issues that you may have with, I don't know, just the overall churn of models, what they choose to release and when, so on and so forth. So whilst all the presentation was there, the kind of unfiltered appeal that comes with the rest of us doing it has always been lacking from that style of preview. So actually Games Workshop moving away from that style of preview and into this more polished, this higher production package that they have now, I think it makes sense. I genuinely do. I think that is a better move for them because that's something that not everyone else can do. I mean, the fact is that there are very few people who can get, multiple Games Workshop designers, whether they're designers for the games, whether they are graphic designers, whether they are sculptors, you can't get a bunch of them in the same room talking about the same product and why they decided to do what they did with it. Most channels can't pull that off. I know for damn sure I would never be able to pull it off, not just because I don't have the space to fit that many people in here, but also because why would they send anyone to me? Like, why would they bother? That's something that they can do that very few other people can. They don't just have the premises for it, but they also have, of course, the just instant unrestricted access to those people. And in the course of promoting whatever it is that they are talking about, it makes way more sense to have, like, Darren Latham, for instance, someone who is an absolute legendary sculptor talking about his work on a thing, than two commentators who, again, I'm not trying to suggest that they are in any way below par, but they won't have the level of knowledge and expertise that Darren Latham has, because that's not their job. But it is his job, and he can talk about it in a way that no one else can. Obviously, myself and all of the stay-at-home commentators, if you will, included within that. So that is a positive move, right? I think that's genuinely a good shift. It also allows them to do things like add subtitles to their streams. Now, that's only a small thing for me personally, because I'm not hard of hearing and I'm okay to sit and watch that kind of thing, and I don't need subtitles to get through. But there are plenty of people who don't have that luxury, or actually find it easier to process that sort of information when they are reading it as opposed to hearing it. And so little things like that, being able to add those subtitles in and just make the whole thing more accessible, that is in itself an incredibly positive step forward for them. However, it's not perfect the way it is. I think overall it's an improvement in a way. It's something that no one else can do. It's something that they are using to actually, I think, show the human element of Games Workshop. I think it's easy to look at Games Workshop as one big thing, right? The big thing sits there, and the big thing throws out new models every single week and throws out new reveals every single week, and then you also get new rules, new additions, new everything. There's just this constant push, this constant churn of new stuff, and it's easy to just see it as, well, it's Games Workshop releasing more stuff. But of course, behind everything they release, there is a person who has to make it. There is someone who is putting time, effort, and creativity into it, and whether or not you like the end result of their time, effort, and creativity, I think allowing those people to actually talk about that is interesting, and it's different to what anyone else can do. However, there is a downside to what they've chosen to do with the more recent previews, and it's something that we started taking the mickey out of when it came to the Adepticon preview, which is taking the same clips of video and showing them over and over again so that you never get a full clear shot of the miniatures. I think at this point, they've got a format nailed down, but they have chosen to scrap almost everything except for the inclusion of a trailer from the first kind of previews that they did, or the established previews that they did. And they've just got rid of everything apart from that and replaced it with something else. Whereas there is something that those earlier previews had that the new ones don't, that I think the new ones would hugely benefit from, and that is actually not going as far into being all sleek and polished and high production as they've decided to go. Because when it comes to reveals and when it comes to preview streams, there's something that you just can't get from a slowly panning shot or a zoom shot or a dolly shot of miniatures, which is being able to fully take in all the details of, say, a full squad of miniatures, which is something that you could do in the older previews. Quite frequently, you would just have models on a plain background or a slightly textured background, and that's it. You would be able to see everything. Maybe only the front view, but it would still be just a moment of being able to see everything clearly. Especially since, when it comes to video versus still, I mean, obviously a video is still going to compress things a little bit, but depending on where you are, depending on how fast your internet is, depending on just a whole myriad of factors, it's a lot harder to get a full read of a miniature when it is moving than it is when it is still. And that is the one thing that I think, for some reason, they just decided to totally abandon that needs to come back. I reckon they're pretty close to having, the perfect format for them. Maybe not for everyone else. It might not work for everyone else. And when it comes to just the kind of thing that most of us do when we're talking about their miniatures, I think there's enough of that. I think they've got the format for their previews pretty close to being nailed down. But for some reason, they just seem really reluctant to incorporate just the odd static still image. And for a lot of us, the miniatures are the big thing. The miniatures are what we're excited about. We want to see what is happening. We want to see every little detail. We want to be able to explore it a little bit. And we don't actually get that option during the preview. We have to wait until it's over to then go to the website to then look at them again. Now, I don't have a massive problem with that necessarily, but we didn't used to need to do that. And the non-inclusion of just the format of just here is the model, I think is the one thing that's letting them down right now. Because everything else, I think, is better than it was before. I think it's more suitable for Games Workshop as a whole. I think it works for the reveals a lot better. I think it does a good job of showing what goes into the design of both rules, lore, and, and the models themselves. But you still have to then wait until all that's done to get something that I think a good chunk of people are there for, which is to properly see those miniatures. I think if they brought that back, if they incorporated that into their newer production style, I think it would be pretty much perfect. But that's just me. And I'm really curious to know what you think, because I've been thinking about this since the last stream ended, and that's kind of where I've landed. And I'd be really interested to know if you feel the same, or whether you think that the old style was way better, or whether the new style is lacking something else. Whether it's too corporate now, whether you actually preferred the older style of having a couple of people just sort of bantering between each other. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, and I'll see you for the next one.